where we worked a number of individuals who have presented their work either orally or as a form of poster. Why some of them were not selected, others were selected, and also the desire for a number of them to translate their abstract into a full manuscript. If somebody tells you that writing is easy, it's a lie, it's difficult. But with consistency, you can make it easy along the line. So the discussion today is something that we have been doing jointly with the African Field Epidemiology Network. Is an NGO that was formed initially by 4 universities, including University of Ghana, and works closely with the various ministries of health. Currently, is in more than 40 African countries and in the Caribbean. And one of their areas of work had to do with manuscript writing. So I decided to tell you a little bit about that one and then move on. Please, you can use this to register, to tell us your details, and then we also identify your needs so that those who will need specific help, we will link them with the scientific writers who will then guide you step by step and let you write out your work. Why are we doing this? I would prefer to tell my personal story because it took somebody to encourage me and also a situation for me to start writing. And permit me to start with the first one where, having seen over 18,000 HIV patients, there was no case that you bring to me that I have not seen. Because I love what I was doing. And so if I should lose a patient, I follow the patient to the mortuary for a post-mortem to be done. I stand there to observe and sometimes look at critically what went wrong. And so there were cases that I don't need any other thing, but because I felt it in patients who have passed away, particularly abdominal tuberculosis. I lost 2 patients. I followed them to the morgue. It was the same feeling that I could palpate, but I thought it was something else. Ever since, there was no case of abdominal TB that I missed. So I did a word round with a Caucasian who had come, and when we got there, I said, oh, when you palpate this, that, it's equal to abdominal TB. She was stunned and said, well, how do you know? And I said, well, I have followed a couple of them to the morgue and they passed away, so there's no way I will miss any of them. And they get well. And said, oh, so how many papers have you written? I said, 3. How many patients have you seen? 18,000 patients. Oh, I have just a little over 100, and I've written over 100 papers. Between the 2 of us, who is an expert? To her, she was just telling me that, listen, you've done a lot, but out there, nobody knows you. You need to communicate and tell the world what you are doing. And so my colleagues, I know that you are working hard, but that will not put you out there. You are only known in that little village as an expert. But for you to be known in the international community, which is a global village that we find ourselves in now, you need to write. And you don't need to do it all alone. By the tail end of this discussion, we will discuss the strategy that a number of us have used. So I have told you why you have to publish. So that is the outline, the anatomy of a manuscript, and crafting each session, some of the common pitfalls and how to avoid them. I brought in a journal because a number of us have a problem with the APC, the article processing fee. And because of that, once we are told that you have to pay this amount of money, say, to hell be it, I'm not going to do anything again. Well, we're also offering you a journal currently it is a Scopus Index journal, but because they want to help a number of African countries, and there's no currently article processing fee. So the APC has been waived off. Well, it will be a good opportunity if you really want to have some of your things published within the shortest possible. And also, you can decide to sign up as a reviewer, because all these play a role in all the things that we're doing. So there is a roadmap, and the roadmap starts with you wanting to publish your work, the manuscript, then that journal, the review process that it goes through, and then the final publication. You may be asked to resubmit the work depending on what the reviewer found, and then the revision, and eventually the editor will make a final decision, and then your work is published. So why publish? It's because it saves lives. It saves lives, and not only that one. That is one way the world will get to know you. And field investigation or a report or data analysis have no public health impact when it sits in our hard drives. And a number of us, we have done that. I'll tell you one story. When I was doing my fellowship in cancer epidemiology, when I introduced myself that I'm coming from Ghana, now there was a very old professor there, and then immediately he said, really, Ghana? Do you know Kolebu Teaching Hospital? Yes, actually, I was coming from. They say, yes, I was so proud to say that, this old man knows Kolebu Teaching Hospital. But he said something which worried me a little bit. He said, do you know about, he mentioned a particular center, which I will not mention here. I said, yes, I even worked there. They said, how many papers have they churned out now? Because one of the centers that was established very early. But what was the problem? There was a lot of infighting. Somebody trying to say, I'm holding on to the data. No, this is the data. The data is for me. My brothers and sisters, data for you and in the test or in the folder means nothing. At the time that you'll be publishing that work, it probably be too old. And he made me aware that, look, and a number of the things that Ghana at the time did not publish, others have published, even though that was one of the best centers that was established very early. And we need to tell our story. There's nobody who can tell the African story like you and I. We've seen so many malaria cases, cerebral malaria, when it comes to the various forms of jaundice or epilepsy, the children that you are seeing, they are quite unique. Nobody is going to tell our story for us. So most of the evidence base that we are using to drive a number of policies is supposed to be driven by African data, but a number of them, it comes outside our continent. And that is why sometimes when we apply what is coming from there, it doesn't work. I am happy that some of the research that we did, the pharmacokinetic research, was part of the reason why globally the HIV treatment using a 5-valent dosing was changed. We noticed that the metabolism in blacks was a little different from the Caucasians. So we don't need the 800 milligrams, but all that we need was a 600 milligram. And part of the pharmacokinetic studies that we did proved that. So it's good we tell our own story. So publication translates your work into action. There's nothing better than you being able to tell the scientific world what you are doing. This is one of the things that I tell my students. I keep telling them, can you please Google your name? And then I ask them, what do you see? So you can see something like a WhatsApp attended a graphic. It has a caption for a couple of people and you find yourself in there. So is that all? You cannot hide now. Whatever you are doing, You can't hide. Somebody just will type your name in there and will identify where you are and what you are doing. And so it's important that we are able to publish our work, because it is one way that opens opportunities for you. And it gives you some leverage. You go out there and a lot of people want to talk to you about the work that you have done. And then immediately they tell you, I have a grant. I want to work in this area. Are you willing to work with me? I also tell you of proposals that I wrote. That eventually, even though we won those proposals, I was never added to the team. Why? Because if you Google my name, the team that came, when you Google my name, there was nothing that was coming up. And to them, no, we want people who have done something. And that's why I would also encourage everybody to publish. It is a purpose-driven approach. If you don't determine to publish, you will not. But don't just say, I'm publishing for the sake of publishing, and then say, mosquito has 4 legs. No. Do a work that will help transform our country and make it better, or our practice. Even if it is a quality of care work that you are doing, yes. So, because it was the interest conference, we decided to tell them about the total number of people who presented in terms of who submitted the abstract, and they had over 1,200. And out of the 1,200, it was only 8 that were accepted as oral presenters, and 600 became poster presentation. So the question is, how do I translate my work to be part of that 8 that globally will be accepted to make that presentation in such a meeting? And you already have some data. And therefore, we were telling them that if you have an abstract already, it is easy for you to translate that into it. So this is the outline. And for typical manuscript, we have a full research article, which is an original one, or you want to just publish your protocol. You're going to do some work which is unique. And this protocol was designed by you. Nobody else did it. And so you can publish that protocol, and it is accepted. So Africa, we have the opportunity to do a lot of things. So you can just publish the protocol. You can also decide to do a review, a scoping review. Now you're going to do something on epilepsy. Just do scoping review on epilepsy across Africa and publish that work. You be the first person to have done scoping exercise. Or you want to do a narrative review or a systematic review or meta-analysis. These are all things that are already there. So just pick one and decide that, okay, I want to do this one. You can also write a perspective on an issue, probably the way we are treating epilepsy in children. You want to write your perspective. The world might not agree with you, but you are saying that this is my viewpoint. It does not necessarily mean it is correct. But we need varying viewpoints in this life. Without them, it will be difficult to have a world that is running in one direction. This is one thing that I always tell my students. Can you imagine if up to today, we kept on moving in the miasma theory of disease causation? It would have been terrible. But we had over 1,000 years that people like me who professed that they were professors were teaching their students diseases were as a result of bad air. And so when you're going to treat a patient, you need to go, you need to do this. But we all got to know that it was not true. We got it wrong. It took somebody to challenge that idea. And so writing a perspective, there's nothing wrong, or a commentary. You want to write a commentary on an article that you have seen, it's okay, and it is accepted. For instance, the Ebola issue that is ongoing now in DRC, knowing and then the behavior of the community, burning treatment centers because their loved ones after dying were never given to them. So they burned the treatment centers. A number of people with the disease, with symptoms off, they decide to run away. So we all know that we are going to have a big problem. You can write a perspective, you can write a commentary on this, and letting people know that the implications of all this. These are things that you can easily do. You can write a letter to the editor. You can also write lessons from the field. You have done some work, your residency training, lessons from the field on residency training. That will guide somebody to know that, listen, you can stay in a residency program for 10 years. Another person can do it within 3 years. So your lessons from the field will guide them, and they will know that, hey, if I need to finish on time, I don't necessarily have to be waiting on my professor to agree to ABC, but I need to get a guideline. I know that I'm supposed to do this attachment. I need to do that attachment and then follow that process. That becomes a guide. You are the first person to document the lessons from the field. Well, because I'm an epidemiologist and we do a number of outbreak investigation, yes, outbreak that you have investigated, you're right. And practice, just practice. How do we practice in this hospital? Clinical practice. You can write or a case report, a case series. So these are series of articles that we can all write. But I know that the one that we love most is that, yes, I've received ethical approval, I've collected data, and then eventually I've analyzed and now written my manuscript and then my abstract. It is great. But these are others that you can also consider. I also decided to show you that I love checklists. And anybody who has worked with me closely will understand that you cannot come to me for us to discuss something without a checklist. It does not mean that you're a lazy person, but we can easily forget about a number of things. The only way we can overcome some of these challenges is to have a checklist, and the checklist will help you. So Stroke has a checklist for cross-sectional study. And so if you're writing the manuscript, which again, I'm going to ask all of you to download, you just type in STROBE, Stroke checklist. They will all come out. So you download the checklist for cross-sectional study. So in writing cross-sectional study, you know that this is the checklist. In writing a cohort study work, this is the checklist. If a case control, this is my checklist. This will guide you. But you see, sometimes we want to reinvent the wheel. Why? You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Think about the process. If something can be done in a different way, that's okay. But if you're not going to do anything so new, why do you want to reinvent the wheel? No. Unless you want to win some Nobel Prize somewhere. But even with that, these approaches or checklists have been tested over the years. And I love checklists, and it helps. If it's a case report, yes, you use the CARE. The CARE would give you an outline of how to write a case report. If it's a clinical trials, use the consult. The consult will show you how to write it. If it's a systematic review, Prisma will tell you that this is how you should go about it. If it's an economic evaluation, Cheers will tell you. So for each one of them, there are clear standards and checklists that will help you. So I have also provided an area where you can download all those things that can help you. So there are reporting guidelines for each one of them. So randomized trials, yes, you get it from Consult, observational studies from Stroke, systematic review from Prisma, study protocol from Spirit, diagnostic or prognostic studies from START, case report from CARE, clinical practice guideline from AGREE, qualitative research from SRQR, if it is an animal preclinical studies from ARRIVE, if it is quality improvement studies from SQUARE, if it's economic. So you have all this, and you can use them to help you. But what is the body or the anatomy? Since you are all medical experts or work in the medical field, the anatomy of any manuscript include the introduction, the methods, the result, discussion. And some will have, in the discussion, you will have your conclusion and your future direction. What goes into the introduction? Now, if you come to a school like a school of public health, you will notice that we'll keep telling you introduction, background, what is your problem statement? Then what is the justification? What is the conceptual framework? In a manuscript, all those things will not go in there, but they will just all of them will be parts of your introduction. And your introduction should end with the research question. Where you are testing a hypothesis, then the hypothesis comes in. Remember, you have a project because you have a problem. You are going to write a manuscript because of a problem that you have now identified the solution to the problem. And you want the whole world to know that when I found this problem, I used this method to identify a solution to the problem. And I want to share with the whole world for them to know that in case anybody should have a similar problem in your country or in your continent, you can use my approach to address it. That's all. That is what manuscript is all about. So if you do not have a problem, it will be difficult for you to write a manuscript. And the manuscript should have a communication objective. What is it that you want the whole world to know? The whole world should know about your single overriding communication objective. So in the introduction, you expect to set the stage. What exactly are you going to do? What exactly are you doing? Then the background of the research is relevant. Then the gap in the existing knowledge. You are not the first person to do that research. And that is why literature review. In school, you have a whole chapter on literature review. But in your manuscript, you will not have a whole chapter. That chapter will be part of the introduction where you be able to tell the gap in the knowledge. And now you are telling the whole world that this gap in this knowledge, my work would address that gap. If you are not able to bring out the gap in the introduction, then your objective will be hanging. Remember, it's a story being told. And in telling that story, there's a gap. That gap, then you are saying that I'm going to fill this gap with these research questions. And depending on the study design I'm going to use, I'm going to even prove to you by testing a hypothesis. If you're not going to test a hypothesis, it's okay. You just say that this is how I'm going to do it. And that's how come in all introduction, it ends with the objective of the study. By the way, it is not a lecture, so you can ask questions at any time. Today we can only do 1 hour, and afterwards we will. But if you have a question, please don't hesitate, you can ask. And then you go into the methods. Now, this is how I define methods. Direct a blind person to cross a road and jump the gutter and get to the other side of the road without falling into the gutter. That's it. That's methods. So anytime you are writing your method, ask yourself, can this blind man follow this instruction, cross the road, jump the gutter, get to the other side without falling into that ditch? If the answer is yes, then you are perfect with your methods. And you're supposed to make sure that the design, the setting, whether it's an experimental work or whatever you're doing, the procedure you use, the data that you collected, how you collected the data, and for each of them, how you analyzed it. And your data analysis should speak to the objectives. Remember, you have told the whole world that there's a gap in the knowledge, and I'm going to fill that gap. And in filling that gap, these are my objectives. And then said, I'm going to collect this data. Tell them how each of the analysis you're going to do is going to address the objective. And eventually, when you start presenting your result, we will see them. Remember, it's a spine. They are talking to each other. The result is basically presenting what you have found. But the big challenge is that we often begin to interpret the results instead of just presenting the result. You don't discuss the result, just present the result. It's good to use visuals because they speak volume, but do not overly present visuals, else it might not also carry the weight you want it to carry. Be sure about the significant outcomes or the facts that you have found and summarize your statistical data. If there are trends, you show it. But this is the approach. Start from the little and end with the complex. Don't start with the complex and end with the simple ones. If you do that, it's the reverse. So you start with the total number of patients that you have seen, and then you end with either your logistic regression or your complex analysis that you have carried out. And your discussion basically says that you are interpreting your finding in context. And the context is that depending on what others have found, whether they agree or disagree with me, if they agree with me, I also tell the whole world that, yes, what I carried out shows that this is where we are going. If my finding is totally different from theirs, I need to tell the world that, no, in this, they looked at the data this way, they analyze it that way, and that could be the reason why we are getting different findings. And anybody who should follow my procedure should get the same. And that's why in your discussion, you do those that are for you and those that are contrary to what you have found. But if they are contrary to what you have found, you should still be able to tell the world the importance of what you have done. Then you talk about the limitation. Don't leave that one out. Do not let the world think that you have not made a mistake or there are not errors in yours. Let them know that the potential errors and gaps. And finally, you conclude, and your conclusion to talk to the objectives. Remember, you set out to find specific issues. So you conclude on those specific issues. When these these 4 areas communicate, then it means that you've written a great manuscript. And for the introduction, we always talk about a funnel shape approach. Start with the global issue, then you narrow down and you end with a clear objective. If it is a prevalence work you are doing, if it is about treatment, okay, globally, what is the agreed treatment? In our region, what is the treatment that we are using? In our local area, what is the treatment? Then what is the gap? If you're not able to bring out a gap, you can't write the objective. Because you write a gap, which will then help you to write the objective. Then the objective is the beginning of the work that you are going to do now. Now, then you come to the methods. You want to be specific, you start with the design and the setting. This is where a lot of people make a mistake. Your setting, Kolebo Teaching Hospital, it is bounded by in the left by this, on the northern by this region, southern by. What has that got to do with? You are going to do some work on epilepsy. Your research setting, what is important there is that how many epilepsy specialists do we have? How many nurses are within that setting? Because it is important to you. If there is nobody in that place who has specialized in caring for children with neurological problems, you state it. That tells you that this work that I'm doing, this facility, they don't even have the expertise to handle it. So the setting is supposed to be related to the work you are doing, not just by the north, by this, by the south, by the east and west. No. Then you are just disgracing everybody. Please, if, for instance, what you are talking about, you believe strongly that the weather plays a role, then you tell us that this is the temperature range. This, the area where patients are cared for. Maybe it's not aerated, is no air conditioning. You bring those things to bear for people to understand this is the setting. And the setting should always have a bearing on the work you are doing. Do not put in information which has nothing to do with your work. Because if you do that, you are deviating. Then you come to the sample size, and this is where we make mistakes. Sample size calculation does not mean that you just use any formula to calculate anything. No. What type of question do you want to answer? If the question you are answering is about prevalence, then you can use a prevalence study sample size calculation formula. If it is a comparative work, yes, then you have to use a sample size calculation that will be comparing. If it is a work that you want to look at proportion, then you do that. Here we are. Sometimes people will use you are looking at a prevalence, then you are using a comparative sample size calculation formula. You get it wrong. Now, number two, your sample size that you calculate is based on a variable. Now, the ideal thing is that all the variables that are in there, for each single variable, you are supposed to calculate sample size. Now, for those of you who have the demographic and health survey report, go to the last pages. You will notice that for each variable, for children, they will calculate the sample size for children, for women, pregnant women, and any, probably they are looking at hemorrhage. Okay? They will calculate sample size for each one of them. That is what ideally we're supposed to do, because the sample size calculation is just saying that for this particular variable, I have enough numbers. I have powered my study enough to be able to make a conclusion. But for the rest, you cannot tell because you did not calculate sample size. And this is why we often say that when you calculate your sample size, because you want to conclude on a particular thing, the rest that you don't want to conclude on, you can still do a sample size calculation just to be sure that if I have numbers around this, would I be able to conclude on these other variables? If the answer is yes, great. If not, then you should be careful when you should find anything significant among them. And obviously, the confidence interval for those variables is going to be wider. Anytime you get a very wide confidence interval around an estimate, it tells you that your sample size was not good enough or not enough, was too small for that particular variable. So that is just the beginning. But if you have enough money, why not? You don't need to calculate sample size. Then you do census. So it's not every work that you have to do sample size calculation. If you are doing a work where the total number of patients that come to that clinic is 20, and the whole year, the total number you will see is 100. But if you do a sample size calculation, you are looking for 500. There's no way out that you can do that. And so such a work, you do not do sample size calculation, but you do census and then you justify it. The second thing that you can also do is that you do a power calculation just to show you that even though I did not get these huge numbers, with my power calculation, I have enough numbers to be able to do this analysis. The next thing about your sampling, how did you select them? I know everybody will say simple random sampling, but how exactly did you do that? Somebody will say, oh, I wrote numbers, the piece of paper, I folded them, I put it in the basket and asked one patient, pick, okay, there's a hand up. Please, you can ask your question. Like I said, it's not Christopher Tamar. You have your hand is up. Please, you can ask your question. Moderator.
Okay, whose hand is up?
I think it's Christopher Tamar.
Christopher, let me unmute him.
Yeah.
So, once we get there.
Christopher, I've unmuted you.
This month, that is if
you can talk.
In the week.
Yes, thank you very much. I needed a clarification on the fact that if you are doing a study, you have all the money, you may not need to do the sample size calculation. You can do a survey if you have the money. I want to also find out, will it be appropriate or
you can do a
ethically right?
census.
Okay, census. Assuming you want to do a census, but in any case, if you do a cross-sectional survey and you select a reasonable sample, you'll still get the answer. Will it be ethically appropriate or allowed for you to waste people's time and resources just because you have the money and you want to do a census? Over.
Well, I think the ethical principle, thank you very much for your question. The ethical principle is about cause no harm. If what you're going to do is not going to cause harm to anybody, and you have the money in the whole world and you want to do that, that is fine. The point I was trying to make is that sometimes you are doing a work that the total number of patients you get in that area is 30 or 40 or 50 for a whole year, and you are doing a 1-year program, right? If you want to get 200, it means that you have to wait for 2 years. For such a work, you don't necessarily have to do sample size calculation. What you do is that you do census, but you justify that one. And even if you want to do a corrected sample size calculation, it is the same approach that you use. So that is the point I was trying to make, that sample size calculation, the reason is because of resources. Remember, before you do any work, you have to go for ethical approval, and the ethics will let you know that, hey, if there's more harm than good, it will not be approved. But I'm talking about the resources. I hope I've been able to convince you. But again, you don't necessarily have to always agree with your lecturer. It's important because, see, I'm one person that believes that we should be able to challenge the teaching that we are currently receiving. Because if we don't, we will not look for other alternative solutions to our problems. And that is why I believe strongly that there may be better ways of doing some of the things that we are currently doing. And the only way out is for somebody to challenge the existing knowledge. Very soon, you and I will not have trouble writing manuscripts because artificial intelligence is going to help us do a lot of things, but artificial intelligence will not think for you. And this is where your innovative ideas will be brought to bear. Because very soon, you will notice that a number of journals will be saying that if this work was published with the assistance word with artificial intelligence, kindly indicate. As part of our session, we may also help you to see some of the tools that you can use in doing some of this writing. But what we don't want you to do is that don't let the artificial intelligence block your thinking pattern, else soon you cannot do anything innovative. And even the prompts you'll be given will be wrong. So sampling, it is another important part of the work that you're supposed to do. Now, you cannot do probability sampling and then use a non-probability analytic approach. See, remember, it's a story you are telling. So if I use a probability form of sampling, then my analysis should also follow a probability approach. If I use a non-probability form of sampling, and this time around, I want to use a probability form of analysis, I need to justify. And I need to also bring in all the assumptions because I started with a different approach, especially in clinical setting. We do convenient sampling or consecutive sampling, which is not a probability sampling. So that alone has an inherent error, and you cannot generalize that one because it will only be applicable to the individual who seek care in that area. Anybody who doesn't come to that area, that work will not apply to such a person. And that's why it's always important to be clear about your sampling approach, whether it's a probability or non-probability. Then your clear case definition. Define who enters into that study. If it's a laboratory work, you do the same. If you have to do environmental assessment, describe how you do it. Then your variables. Remember what you have as your dependent and independent variables. Okay, because sometimes this is where people make a number of mistakes. Your dependent variable, which is the question you are asking, becomes an independent variable again. In that sense, we are going to run into trouble. So these are the few things we should bear in mind, and then your statistical method or whichever software you're using, and make sure that the ethics and various approvals are sought from the appropriate quarters. What is the method? Like I said, you are working a blind person, be it a case study that you are writing or a cross-sectional study or whichever. So lead with your primary finding when it comes to the methods. If it is a case study that you are writing, and you are going to talk about the time, place, and person and your references and all that you want to do. Sorry, I think that's the results. Sorry, so that the title here is not complete. Then in your discussion, this is where the word SOCO, which is the single overriding communication objective. What is it? What is it that I want to tell the world? It's only one message out there. I know in your work, you have about 4 objectives. You can't have 4 objectives in a research, in a scientific journal. No, it's only one objective. And so you try and make sure that you are focusing on the message. What is my message? You summarize the key findings first. Then you link this to the introduction. And your inverted funnel shape, you start with the interpretation of the result without repeating your result. And then you compare with existing literature. You acknowledge your limitation honestly, and it states the public health action clearly. Few things that I keep saying that these are the common pitfalls that you should avoid. Avoid vague objective to study malaria in children. What exactly about malaria in children? You should be more specific. So you want to determine maybe the attack rate or the risk factors for malaria among children under 5 in a specific area, or the interpretation of result instead of just straightforward sharing your result or describing your result. Now we begin to interpret the result. Interpretation means you are adding a reason to it. Now, if it is 50% prevalence of malaria, or the risk, the odds of this is 2, don't write the odds, then say, this odd is this because 17 people went here and 2 went this way. No, that is interpretation. Just leave the result the way you captured it, or you have received it, or you found it. Document it that way. Keeping result purely descriptive is saving the interpretation for your discussion. And don't ignore guidelines. I call them checklists. Take the checklist to guide you. I prefer you design your own checklist than quickly downloading the ones that have been developed by experts. Use that one, but develop your own checklist. It helps you. And so before you start writing, have the outline. And that is how we all do it. Have the outline first. Design it in your mind, have the outline, and that will help you to do the work a better way. The other few things that we want you to remember is that when you are burying the public health implication, don't bury it. Make sure that it is clear and it's actionable and others can see. Submitting before your co-authors review the work. This is one of the, probably along the line, you should also have a presentation on authorship and who is supposed to be an author on the paper. You should always have an agreement before you start writing, because one of the things that can easily create problem among friends is publication. Somebody say, why did you place me at this tail end? Please engage all of them. But it is also sad that sometimes you engage them, when you send the work to them, they will not review. But they want to be there. So you need to make sure that, by the way, some are very busy. And so you should always remind them and help you to do that review. So sharing with your supervisors and your mentor first, and you should do your peer review, you start at home. And then overclaiming in the conclusion, it is one of the things that people do. You think that you've solved the problem of the entire world. Don't do so. Be careful, because probably others have done it. I know people start using, this is the first, this is the first. It's possible not the first. But you have not done a thorough literature review. And so be a little modest when it comes to those areas. Stating what the data actually support. No more, no less. Just what you have found. Then I decided to say that, where do you submit your work? Journal submitting. So does the journal publish your type of study? This is the first scope that you need to do, depending on the work that you have done and whether the work is in a particular geography or in a particular subject area. If what you have done is only in Greater Accra and doesn't have a global picture. And here you are, you want to go and publish in Lancet. It's not, Lancet will not ask it because its geographical scope is looking at things that have been done in more than 4, 5, or 50 countries. You will notice that it is multiple country work that they publish. Now you have done it in one small village in Accra, and you want Lancet to accept that one. He will not accept. And then you get angry. Now Lancet rejected my paper. No, Lancet did not reject your paper. You chose the wrong journal. So we want you to do the first scoping and be sure that, yes, the open access is there for you. And the African researchers should prioritize open access journal so that findings reach policymakers and practitioners who cannot afford the payroll. You need to pay in some areas. And because you want your work to be used by others, it is also good. Let's not forget about the predatory journals. And I'm asking everybody, always use this one, thinkchecksubmit.org. It will tell you about all the predatory journals. And a number of friends, of few people, students have published in predatory journal. There's no journal that you submit, and then within 1 month, you are ready to publish. It's a predatory journal. Then they'll collect you $100. Your money is gone for free. In fact, the day you get to know that it's a predatory journal, do not add it to your publication when you are sharing your work with international community. Because the more you add it and people get to know, you say, at this level, you are being exploited by these predatory journals. So please always do the think, check, submit. Okay? Always verify the journal's legitimacy. Once you verify its legitimacy, you know that, oh, okay, I'm sending you to the right place. But any journal that tells you that, oh, submit, and they will be soliciting that you have been selected to be the lead author in so and so, or you are one of the best that we want to publish your work this way. Please be mindful of those journals. And so you read the journal formats, okay, and their specifics, their specification before you do the submission. Non-compliant submission is equal to rejection. In fact, it will not cross the first line. And for those who have been my student before, there's an exam that I set, and every year I set it. And it's nothing. I just ask them, send me an email via attachment of work that the answer is on the internet already. And half of the class always fail. And I tell them, this is why your interview, you always fail, because you don't pass the first screening phase. The first screening phase is all about compliance. It's not about how good your CV is or how excellent the work that you have done. No, it's all about compliance. So once you're a non-compliant individual, then be rest assured that you will suffer in the hands of editors and reviewers because it will not cross the first phase. Your cover letter should state why this paper, why this journal, and no prior or concurrent submission elsewhere. Don't do that. The same paper you submitted to the BMC, then you submit to Ghana Medical Journal. It is not done. Okay? Because the day they get to know, you'll run into trouble because concurrent submission elsewhere or any conflict of interest, all these details you need to provide is important for them. If it's a cross-sectional study, yes, you can look at a couple of journals, and we decided that we can share a number of them with you that you can think about it because it's all about epidemiology and then outbreak investigation. Currently, it is free access. The reason why we do not collect money is because we want to encourage African researchers to publish more so that we remove this APC barrier for young, brilliant African researchers to be able to showcase what they are doing. Now, once you get known out there, it becomes easier for you to attract waivers and at the same time to attract people who will help you publish in other areas. And that is why we encourage people to do such work. We also publish some special consideration for FETPs, depending on what you're doing. So a few points to note. If you want it to go to the African Journal, then one of the things you should do, the words should not be more than 3,500. And most of the journals, please read the guidelines well. We'll tell you that your words should not be more than 3,500. Okay, so use the relevant equator reporting guideline, either the stroke or the consort, and then just be sure that your referencing is done properly. And you can send queries to the chief editor. And for that one specific, most journals, it takes 4 to 12 weeks for the first decision. And then the report that you receive will be accept minor revision or major revision or reject. But rejection, in fact, does not mean you should get angry. It only means that, can you take a closer look at your work and revise it well? You can resubmit to the same journal or you submit to a different journal, but you receive feedback, which helps you to improve on your work. And that's why the reviewers will ask that you should prepare a response letter, which is point by point, addressing each of the areas respectfully. Now, don't get angry with a reviewer and start insulting them. No. But reviewers, some of them can be a little mean, but don't get worried. It helps you to train, okay? And it helps you to get better. I always say that never respond to a reviewer's comment the same day when you receive it. Sleep over it. Read, you get angry, get some water, drink, and go and sleep. A day or two later, take that paper again and start looking at it. But it will amaze you the things that you will learn from that. The last point that I want to make is that if you disagree with the reviewer, please write and explain to the reviewer why you disagree. Knowledge is not in one person's head. So disagreeing with a reviewer, it is okay. But your feedback and your response should be done in a very respectful way. Sometimes some reviewers would insist that you should quote some of their work. I think my team knows about this. We've had a couple of reviewers who insist that, why didn't you quote this journal and that, even though that journal is not, that work is not strictly aligned with ours. Some will refuse, and then the editor also refused to publish our work. It's okay. If you should agree with everybody, then probably what you are doing is not the best. And so sometimes you will have some few back and forth. Then how do you navigate through the review process? Take your time, look at it, look at the comments, provide response, and make sure it's in context. You can also appeal if you think that your work is rejected unfairly. Okay? Most journals will do that, but you have the ear of the editor-in-chief, and they can help you in the decision taking. One of the things that why Jeff believes that, or there's a journal of intervention epidemiology and public health. If your work is in the area of HIV, TB, malaria, please, they are open to support you in all those areas. And during the peer review process, they will guide you. And even if it is rejected, they will show you how to go about it. So this is the journal that I just mentioned to you. It is an African journal and helps you to do your work and get it published out there. Jeff also support the interest conference. So we are the ones who help train young researchers when it comes to manuscript writing and also submission of their abstract. And I thought that I should use this. So Jeff is in all these journals in terms of, it's in Scopus Index, it is in African Journal of Online, DOA, EB Score, Open Alex. So all these index, they are all in there. And so it is not like a journal that is not indexed. It is indexed in all these areas. Thank you very much. You can ask all your questions. And then later on, we will, like I said, we'll start working on some of the things one after the other. Moderator.
Thank you very much,
Over
Professor Kenu. All right. Thank you so much, Professor Kenu, for that very insightful presentation. I hope we have all learned so much from this succinct presentation, and it will go a long way to help us in our desire to publish our observations and also in how to present this to the general public. If we have any questions, we can ask them, and then we'll bring this session to a close. We will be having another session with Professor Kenu where he will take us step by step through the various segments of the manuscript, and then we will have a practical session where we will also make input. So in the subsequent meetings, let's come with all our questions, come with manuscripts that we are writing so that Prof. Kenu can help us shape them. If there are any questions, please raise your hand so that I can unmute you to ask the question. You can also put questions in the chat box. Okay, so I can see a hand. Let me see whose hand it is. Gladys Lomoti, I've unmuted you. Gladys Lomoti,
Thank you very
I've
much.
unmuted you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Prof. Keno, for this stimulating presentation. I have a question when it comes to the methodology. You mentioned that for laboratory parts, we need to also go a little into detail of the laboratory work. So I just wanted to find out how much detail is detail. For instance, if you are doing a research that has to do with maybe checking the hemoglobin level of participants, do you need to state what method they are using, which machine,
Let's
how
go.
that is read and all that? Or you can say through standard methods. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now what you want to do is that you want to be sure that you are providing guidance so that anybody who is going to do the same can repeat what you have done. Now, how did you collect the blood sample? So you are describing maybe a child comes, he sits down. If you toffee you give to them or something that distracts them, and then you take the blood from their cubital fossa.
It's your colleague there.
How many meals is taken, okay? And then immediately you take the blood sample. What do you do? If you spin that blood or you put that blood somewhere, whatever you do to that blood before the lab work is done, you describe it. Now, in the lab, do you separate the serum from the cells, or what exactly do you do? Now, this is where, if it's a PhD work, and you are silent on all that your reviewer will say that you didn't do the lab part of the work, and therefore you cannot claim ownership to your work. You might not necessarily be the person to do everything, but you should describe that, yes, when you separate this and then you use a pipette, you give 2 mils into this, and then at the end of it, you get your result. That's the basic description we want. But if you are very quiet on everything, but you always say that 5 mils of blood is taken and then we do full blood count. No. There's a big gap that is missing. What did you do to that 5 mils of blood? Did you transport it to, if it's a particular lab with ISO accreditation, yes, you can mention that lab transported to this lab. If because you're in Accra and you're sending the sample to Kumasi and you have to do triple form of storage before sending, you describe that. That's basically what you want. You just want you to guide. Remember, I keep saying that guide the blind person to cross the street. Guide this person to repeat exactly what you have done so that they can get the same results. I don't know if I've been able to provide guidance. And please, if your instruments are calibrated, indicate that, because that is what can lead to systematic error if it's not calibrated. So if it's calibrated, you indicate the calibration that is done as well.
Because you're driving. Thank you, sir.
The crunches.
All right, moderator, I think there's a few more questions in the...
Yes, Prof.
All right.
Let me see. Are there some more questions? Let me look at the chat. Please let me. Okay. How can one join the JEPH program or group?
Oh, okay. I guess, no, the Journal of Intervention, Epidemiology, and Public Health is not a group, is a journal, but it is hosted by the African Field Epidemiology Network. And they are saying that for now, it is free. You can publish there for free. There's no processing fee. And the reason why they are not charging for processing fee is because they realize that, look, we are doing a lot here, but nobody knows about us. And often what we are basing our treatment and everything on is from outside. But their makeup and our makeup is not the same. So it's possible that there are few things that we are getting wrong. Can we do it within our setting so that our policies will be based on our setting rather than a different country's setting? And that is the basis for which the Journal of Intervention, Epidemiology, and Public Health is currently giving that out for free. But,
All right, thank you.
For the NGO itself, yes, it does a lot of things, including guiding people who want to write grants and want to make sure that the grant passes through. Maybe you have a grant, you want them to manage the grant for you to implement because you are not too sure how to manage the grant. Yes, they are able to do that one for you.
Thank
Over to
you.
you.
So Paul wants to know what time and when you, okay, we'll communicate the next lecture time to you. Someone wants to know whether there's a standard consent form for a case report.
Yes, remember for a case report, I told you about the care. So there is, remember my first slide that I showed to all of you? If you want to write a case report, then you have to use that outline, and which I shared earlier. I'm just going to project that one again. So for a case report, this is what you use. You use the care reporting guideline to guide you. And I keep saying, please, there's a lot out there. So don't reinvent the wheel. Else you write, and at the end of the day, the journal would say that it does not follow our outline. Over.
All right. Thank you very much,
It's
Prof.
asking for a
Prof has
consent. Sorry,
another
somebody too
meeting
is
after
asking.
this.
Somebody is asking whether there's a consent form.
Yeah, Prof.
Consent form for a case report. Well, it depends on if at the time of writing the case report, the patient is still there. Sometimes case reports are written on cases where the patient has passed away. Okay, so you are not able to seek consent from that patient. But as a team, or if you have an ethical review board, yes, you can inform them that you are publishing it. But often we do not seek for ethical clearance for a case report because it's just a case that you have seen. Probably the person is gone or the person is nowhere to be found. But that issue that has been identified is quite unique, and a lot can learn from that.
Okay. No, back over there. Thank you very much, Prof, for the time you have spent giving us this presentation. Let's hold on to our questions, write them down so that in the next session, Prof can handle them. Prof will have to get into another meeting now. So we'll bring the meeting to a close and we'll be communicating to you the date and time for the next session with Prof. Eneskenu. Professor Eneskenu, we thank you very much for sharing these insights with us. And we hope that you will be granted good health and strength as we await the subsequent presentations. Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you and have a lovely evening. Bye for now. But when we finish, we'll share the slides with everyone. So please don't worry about that one.
Bye-bye, all participants, for joining this meeting. We'll write down your questions, bring manuscript to help us polish this. Thank you very much and good evening to us all. Chat.